Good evening everyone, welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 30th September 2025 and today we have some very important topics from different newspapers. So one by one we'll be discussing all these topics in a very detailed manner. And the overall objective of this discussion is to make sure that you are adequately equipped with all relevant current affairs topics, and they're going to be important for both prelims and mains examinations. So the first topic with which we're going to start the session is about an important article that has been given in the Hindu newspaper. And this article is talking about the Right to Information Act has been transformed over a period of time into Right to DNA Information. Now this is in the context of a recent legislation passed by the Parliament, or it is in debate. So let's understand what exactly is the objective of Right to Information Act. How Digital Personal Data Protection Bill has been transforming the RTI Act into Right to DNA Information. So we all knew about the RTI Act. So if we talk about the RTI Act, this is a mechanism or a legal mechanism which mandates that the government officers or the government offices should mandatorily provide information to the public. So therefore, it essentially empower the public with information. This is the overall objective of the Right to Information Act. And in fact, the Right to Information Act is also founded on the principle of democracy. So if we talk about the democracy, so it essentially defined as for the people, by the people, of the people, right? So this is how democracy has been described over the period of last few centuries. So therefore, all information that the government has will be provided to the public under the Right to Information Act. And in fact, the Right to Information Act has provided a statutory right for every citizens to seek information from the government and government organizations. And in fact, so we all knew that the government usually acts as a custodian of information. So custodian of information, that essentially means that the government would have information with it. And in fact, when government provides information to the public, so it will result in transparency as well as accountability in the administration. So when citizens are adequately empowered with information, so it will result in both transparency and accountability. So therefore, government actually acts as a custodian of information on behalf of public. And in fact, citizens elect their representatives, so thereby citizens legitimize the representatives by electing them, because ultimately in India citizens elect their representatives, and who in turn they legitimize the bureaucracy as well. So this is the brief introduction and the context of the Right to Information Act. So let's understand the other important dimensions of the Right to Information Act. Now, in fact, the Right to Information Act has long been known as a legislation that deepened democracy. So no doubt it has deepened democracy, and it has resulted in the participation of citizens in the governance or the decision making process, because when citizens are adequately aware about the information related to how the government has been functioning and what are the details of important mechanisms that the government is holding, so therefore it essentially deepened democracy. Right to Information Act has deepened democracy by empowering public. So it has empowered the public and it has deepened the democracy in India. Right, so when it has deepened the democracy, as I have already told you, that it empowered the citizens by information, through providing information, and it has also provided access to the government held information to the citizens, and ultimately it led to the empowering citizens, and it further deepens the democracy in a country like India. However, so when citizens have adequate access to information, it will result in both transparency as well as accountability, right? So it would usher in both transparency and accountability in administration or governance in a country like India. However, the RTI Act, the Right to Information Act, right? So this is a legislative mechanism or legislative or a legislation, and this RTI Act was passed in the year 2005, and it provides information to the, it provides information to the citizens and thereby empowering citizens with adequate information. So this is the intention and objective of RTI Act, and in fact the other objective is to arrest corruption and bring in more transparency and accountability in the administration are the objectives of the RTI Act. Right, so in fact by establishing transparency as a default mode of governance, and in fact so when we call governance a fair governance, so that essentially means that we ensure transparency is the default mode of the governance. So therefore overall the Right to Information Act has essentially transformed the relationship between the citizens and the state, so thereby ultimately enabling the ordinary people so that they scrutinize the decisions that have been taken by the government. For example, imagine that you have the information with respect to Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. So if you have adequate information, then you would be able to scrutinize the information, and then you would be able to know the details of the funding and also the distribution of the funding as well. And you could also find out if there are any leakages, if there are any corruption like things. If such things takes place, you would easily understand from the available information, from the available data. So ultimately you could scrutinize the decisions taken by the government, and you could also hold the governments accountable, right? So ultimately you would expose leakages, you would expose corruptions as well. So there are many incidents where through RTI Act the whistleblowers expose corruption in schemes like Manrega, right? But despite the importance of the RTI Act, there are certain amendments made to the section 8 clause 1 and subclause J. So this is one section within the RTI Act, and these amendments have been made through the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, right? So you should have to remember this Digital Personal Data Protection Act. So through this Digital Personal Data Protection Act, so certain amendments have been made to the RTI Act of section 8 subsection 1 and subsection 1 and G, right? So in fact this Digital Personal Data Protection Act making amendments to section 8 clause 1 and subclause J, it is actually a departure from the vision. So what sort of a vision? So the vision is empowering citizens and also hold the government accountable. So this is the vision and this is the objective of the RTI Act. But the amendments have been made to the RTI Act through Digital Personal Data Protection Act section 8 clause 1 and subclause J. So they are the departure from the vision, right? So therefore what was once a nuanced balance, right? For example, section 8 talks about there is a certain information that should not be provided under the RTI Act. So that information might be related to the individual privacy, right? So if it violates the individual's privacy, then that information will not be provided under the RTI Act, and this is what it says. Right, so there's a balance. So what sort of an information should be provided and which type of information should not be provided, right? So a nuanced balance between privacy and transparency now risks becoming a legal framework for denying access to the vital public information, right? So ultimately the Digital Personal Data Protection Act so may emerge as a threat, right? So it may emerge as a threat to the vision of the RTI Act. Now understand the objectives of the Right to Information Act. As I've already told you, it empowers the citizens with adequate access to information, and it would contain corruption, it promotes transparency and accountability, and it will also enhance people's participation in the democratic process, right? So these are the core objectives of the Right to Information Act. Now whenever you are writing any answer on the RTI Act, so you must make such impactful diagrams to score good marks, right? So in this context, as I've already told you, that within the Right to Information Act there is a certain provision. So one such section is section 8 clause 1 and subclause J, right? So however, the Personal Data Protection Act So this is going to make certain amendments to the section 8 clause 1 and subclause J of the RTI Act, right? So therefore, when the section 8 clause 1 and subclause J of the RTI Act, so when it was first enacted, the RTI Act sought to carefully reconcile citizens' right to information with individuals' right to privacy, right? So therefore, citizens' right to information is also very important, because when you sought information about a certain program, a certain scheme, the government official should give you the relevant information, and at the same time the information that you sought should not violate the privacy of any individual. So this is what section 8 says that, right? So what sort of an information that a public information officer should not give? So therefore, this particular section has allowed the public authorities to withhold certain information, right? For example, you are a public information officer and somebody sought information from you, and in case if it is violating section 8 clause 1 and clause J of the RTI Act, the public information officer may deny giving information to you. So therefore, it allowed the public authorities to withhold personal information, and only if it had no connection to the public activity, or if the disclosure of the information would amount to an unwarranted invasion of privacy, then the public information officer may deny the information to the individual, right? So even then, such clauses are existing in the RTI Act, but providing information is a very important aspect here, and the public authorities should not simply deny the information, right? So therefore, even such provisions are existing. Disclosure was permitted when the larger public interest justified giving information. So if a larger public interest is involved when it comes to giving information, then of course it is true that the disclosure permitted even those cases as well. So therefore, a crucial safeguard in this provision, so that we should have to understand, the crucial safeguard in this provision is that information that could not be denied to the parliament, information that could not be denied to the state legislature. For example, parliament sought information from a public office, and this public office has provided information to the parliament, right? So public office has not denied information to the parliament, so it has provided information to the parliament, and at the same time the public office also provided information to the state legislature as well, right? So they have provided information to the parliament and state legislature, but they should not deny. So if they are ready to give information to the parliament and state legislature, so they should not deny giving information to the citizen or an individual. So this is what the crucial safeguard under the RTI Act. So that essentially means that any information which is provided for the state legislature and also the parliament, the very same information that should be given to the individual citizen as well, right? And in fact, the acid test has ensured that privacy could not be used as a blanket excuse. For example, you approached a public information officer, and this public information officer has told you that because of the privacy concerns, we are not able to provide you the information. So therefore, when it comes to providing information, this privacy should not be a blanket for providing information. So this should not be a blanket excuse to restrict the transparency, to restrict providing information. And at the same time, the public information officer should also understand the concerns related to the privacy of an individual. So therefore this is essential balance that has to be maintained. So this balance has to be fundamentally maintained. Now let's understand the ambiguity of the personal information. So how there's an ambiguity with respect to the personal information. Now, if an individual sought personal information of another individual through RTI Act, then it violates the privacy. So therefore, such information must be declined. Now, in fact, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, DPDP Act, Digital Personal Data Protection Act, so it has come up with an intervention, and this intervention has radically altered this equilibrium. Now, what equilibrium we are talking about? The equilibrium here is that information should be provided to the individuals under the RTI Act, and at the same time, while giving information to the individuals, the public information officer should also understand the nature of information, right? So if such RTI query or RTI application violates or sought the personal information, then the public information officer must decline providing information. So therefore, there is an equilibrium. So there are provisions for providing information, and there are also provisions for denying information, right? So this is an equilibrium that has been maintained. However, the DPDP Act's intervention has radically altered this equilibrium by reducing section 8 clause 1 and subclause J, right? So therefore, it has reduced section 8 clause 1 and subclause J, and in fact it even introduced ambiguity, and it even expanded the scope of personal information to the point of absurdity, right? So for example, when it comes to personal information, so it has been vaguely defined. It has included all types of information as a personal information. So therefore, it provides a chance for the government agencies to deny information under the RTI Act, right? So that's how it becomes the right to information from right to deny information, because every information, almost every information, is classified as a personal information under this DPDP Act's amendment. So therefore, then how can the public information officers would give information to the public under the RTI Act? And this is the main concern here, right? So here we have to understand there are two interpretations of the person. Now they're competing with each other, right? So one interpretation is confined to the natural persons, and the other with respect to the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill. So therefore, it actually encompassing entities as diverse as companies, associations, and even the state itself. So therefore, there are multiple number of entities, individuals who have been brought under the personal information criteria or category. So therefore, it will be easier for the government to decline providing information to the public, right? So however, in later, because the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, so it has encompassed entities as diverse as companies, associations, and even the state itself. Now in that case, what happens is that every document, every decision could be shielded as personal information, and therefore it will become easier for the government officials to easily deny the information. So ultimately, RTI actually risks being transformed into right to deny information. So this expansive interpretation is compounded by Digital Personal Data Protection Act's overriding effect on other laws, and its severe penalties for disclosure violations, which may reach as high as 250 crore as well. And in fact, it even faced with such risks, public information officers are incentivized to adopt a defensive posture, erring on the side of denial rather than the disclosure, right? So therefore, this will have a chilling effect, and that undermines the very spirit of the RTI Act. So the very spirit of the RTI Act is providing information to the citizens, empowering citizens by providing information. But with Digital Personal Data Protection Act, so what happens? The coverage has been widened, right? So the coverage of personal information has been widened. So because of that reason, there is a high possibility that the public information officers or the government agencies might deny providing information, right? So therefore, ultimately it amounts to replacing openness with the opacity. So let's understand the implications for corruption and the accountability dimensions. Now, in fact, it is a well-known fact that corruption thrives in secrecy. So if the government is maintaining secrecy, that means there is a possibility for corruption to thrive, right? So corruption thrives in secrecy, and the antidote would be transparency. So a transparency is considered as an antidote to the corruption, and it is one of the most effective tools available to citizens combating corruption, right? So with transparency, citizens can combat corruption, can combat leakages, and citizens can also hold the government officers and the government organizations accountable, right? So several cases have proved this. However, what happens is that if you deny information to the citizens under the RTI Act, now that essentially brings in secrecy, because the government agencies are not providing you the information, showing the reason that the Digital Personal Data Protection Act has allowed not providing information to the citizens, right? So the definition of the personal information has been broadened. The definition of personal information has been broadened, and even routine and seemingly harmless documents such as corrected mark sheet, a signed official order, lists of pension beneficiaries, now all these important and even harmless documents, they will also be denied by the public information officers and other government agencies, showing that they might violate the personal information, they might violate the privacy of the individuals. So there are examples also. For example, Rajasthan's public disclosure of pension details. So the Rajasthan's public disclosure of pension details, so they have exposed the ghost beneficiaries. So beneficiaries who are not existing in real form, but they are getting benefits. It has exposed the ghost beneficiaries and the ghost cards as well. So therefore, you can understand the importance of the RTI Act, how RTI Act actually plays a very important role. So such a disclosure would reveal the ghost beneficiaries, ghost cards, it exposes corruption and leakages as well. So therefore, this legal transformation effectively institutionalizes opacity, and information that directly exposes corruption, malpractices might be dismissed as personal information. For example, imagine that you sought in information from the public information officer, and this information might expose the corruption, but the public information officer denied providing you the information, showing that it violates the privacy of certain entities, right? So therefore, it ultimately brought in secrecy. Secrecy will not good for the governance. Secrecy will gives rise to the corruption, right? So therefore, even the clause allowing disclosure in cases of larger public interest, so they even provide a little relief, because it is rarely invoked in practice, and it also demands an onerous justification from the citizens, right? So therefore, the Digital Personal Data Protection Amendments, they not only weaken the RTI Act, but also embolden corruption by making concealment the default, right? So this is how the equilibrium has been damaged by the Digital Personal Data Protection Act by amending section 8 clause 1 and subclause J of the RTI Act. Now the next important topic is, recently the center has cleared translocation of tigers from Tadoba National Park in Maharashtra to Pench to Sahyadri Reserve, right? So let's understand this, because from the environment perspective also this is very important, right? So from environment perspective, this is very important. So the Union Environment Ministry, so it has recently approved the translocation of tigers from Tadoba, Andheri and Pench reserves. Now we all knew that the Pench Tiger Reserve is located in Maharashtra, and Tadoba Andheri National Park is also Tiger Reserve and National Park. They are located in the state of Maharashtra. So therefore, Union Environment Ministry has approved the translocation of tigers from both Pench Tiger Reserve, Tadoba Andheri Tiger Reserve to the Sahyadri Tiger Reserve. Right, so we'll understand what are the reasons for the translocation of tigers. Right, so the primary reason that the government has been giving is to revive the big cats population in the Western Ghats. Because of this reason, they are going to translocate the Panch Tiger Reserve and Tadoba Andheri Tiger Reserve tigers to Sahyadri Tiger Reserve in the state of Madhya Pradesh. And you can see here the Panch Tiger Reserve is very close to Nagpur, and Tadoba Andheri Tiger Reserve, which is also located in Maharashtra, and they're going to translocate tigers from these two tiger reserves to Sahyadri Tiger Reserve. It was notified in the year 2010, and it even spread across 1165 square kilometers. Right, now a few things that we should understand about this. Now it is being said that the Sahyadri Tiger Reserve rich forest vegetation, but the problem is that the tiger population in the Sahyadri Tiger Reserve is transient in nature. So we don't have a stable tiger population in Sahyadri Tiger Reserve despite we have a rich forest vegetation. Now only in the recent past, three male tigers have been frequently recorded on the camera traps in Sahyadri Tiger Reserve. So therefore there is no sustainable tiger population in Sahyadri Tiger Reserve in the Western Ghats. Right, so in fact, because of this reason, in order to increase the tigers population in the Western Ghats, Tadoba Andheri Tiger Reserve and Panch Tiger Reserve tigers will be translocated into the Sahyadri Tiger Reserve. So I hope you have understood this. Now, as I've already told you that it was established in 2010 and it spread across 1165 square kilometers, and it encompasses parts of Kolhapur, Sangli, Satara, Ratnagiri districts of Maharashtra. And in fact, this was formed by merging Chandoli National Park and Koyna Wildlife Sanctuary. Right, so in fact, the Sahyadri Tiger Reserve has a rich forest cover, but the tiger presence has remained transient and non-breeding in nature. So by shifting tigers from these two tiger reserves to Sahyadri Tiger Reserve, the experts have been optimistic that the tiger population may be revived in Western Ghats region. So let's understand the reason for the translocation of tigers. So the Sahyadri Tiger Reserve. So this Sahyadri Tiger Reserve is suitable for the forest and prey base but lacks a stable tiger population. However, translocation aims to ensure long-term tiger survival in the Western Ghats, and which is an ecologically sensitive and biodiversity rich area. Now let's understand the institutions involved and how this is going to be implemented and what time it will take. Now it has been approved by the Union Environment Ministry's Wildlife Division. Now Wildlife Institute of India and State Forest Department, so they are actually responsible for the scientific planning and execution. And in fact, the project has been earlier recommended by the National Tiger Conservation Authority, which is a body established under the Wildlife Protection Act. And in fact, such a project has been earlier recommended by the National Tiger Conservation Authority in October 2023 for reviving the tiger population in the Western Ghats. So let's understand its ecological significance, because it also has an ecological significance. Now, tiger is known as the top predator. In any ecosystem, tiger is known as a top predator and a carnivore species. So strengthening tiger presence in the Sahyadri Tiger Reserve, so it ensures the habitat connectivity between Western Ghats reserves and Goa and Karnataka. And apart from that, as I've already told you, it is a top predator, so therefore it helps maintain ecological balance and it will boost the conservation of prey species as well. And apart from that, it supports the long-term goal of landscape level tiger conservation in India. Now understand, India is the country which houses 60%, which is home to 70%, around 70% of the global tiger population. So therefore such measures will help further revive the tiger population in different regions as well. And tigers as a top predators, they will help maintain the ecological and sustainable environment as well. So the next topic is the Nepal crisis. right? So in this context, there's an article given in the Hindu newspaper. So let's understand about this. So it says that Sushila Karki is going to be the first woman prime minister of Nepal. Now we have seen that there are protests by the Nepali youth against the Nepal government, and the reason for the protest is corruption and the ban on social media. And because of these reasons, Nepal youth have come onto the roads on a large scale, and they started protesting against the government, right? So let's understand the context. The context is that Nepal's president Ramchandra Paudel, so he recently appointed former Chief Justice of Nepal Sushila Karki as country's new prime minister. And in fact, Sushila Karki is going to be the first woman prime minister of Nepal. And in fact, President Ramchandra Paudel has even dissolved the parliament on Friday, as days of political turmoil showed signs of abating in the Himalayan nation. And in fact, President Ramchandra Paudel, he also announced that fresh elections are going to take place on March 5th, 2026 until former Chief Justice of Nepal, Sushila Karki, is going to be the Prime Minister of Nepal for this interim government. Right. So as I've already told you that the Nepal is on fire, and a large scale violence, and the youth have been protesting against the government. Now Nepal is witnessing a youth-led protest, and they are popularly called as Gen Z protests, right? So they are popularly called as Gen Z protests. So they are being triggered by deep-seated grievances over corruption, inequality, and the failure to implement the promises made in 2006 Comprehensive Peace Agreement. So we will also understand what exactly is a Comprehensive Peace Agreement. So if we talk about this Comprehensive Peace Agreement, so it came into existence in the year 2006, but the problem here is that the promises which are made as part of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, so these are not implemented. Over and above, there's a large scale corruption in Nepal, inequality is existing. So all these problems have led to large scale youth protests in Nepal, and that brought down the government, right? So it was like a revolution that took place in Bangladesh. Now if you look at the historical background, as I've already told you, that poor implementation or non-implementation of the promises made under the Comprehensive Peace Agreement 2006, one of the reason for the protests. And in fact, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement was signed between the Maoist and Nepali government, right? So it has been signed between the Maoists, who are influenced by the left ideology, and the government of Nepal in the year 2006. And in fact, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement has been signed to end a 10-year-long civil war, right? So before 2006 there was a civil war in Nepal, and this Comprehensive Peace Agreement has been signed to end this 10-year-long civil war. So therefore this Comprehensive Peace Agreement has created hopes in the people of Nepal about peace, justice, and democracy. However, after this 2006 Comprehensive Peace Agreement, monarchy was existing, and monarchy was abolished in Nepal, and an interim constitution has been adopted in the year 2007, immediately after the Comprehensive Peace Agreement came into existence. So therefore the interim constitution adopted by the Nepal people led to a new republican framework based on inclusiveness and also human rights. And in fact, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, so this Comprehensive Peace Agreement has also mandated the formation of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and apart from that it has also provided or mandated for the formation of Disappeared Commission on Disappeared Persons to address the conflict era human rights violations. Right, so this is what the comprehensive peace agreement framework has provided. But the problem is the 2006 comprehensive peace agreement has not been implemented by the successive governments, and they even failed to deliver justice to the people, truth seeking, and even reparations to the victims. So therefore, even if the comprehensive peace agreement came into the existence, the provisions under the comprehensive peace agreement or promises under it have not been implemented. And in fact, Nepal again promulgated a new constitution in the year 2015. But the problem with the Nepal's 2015 new constitution is that it excluded the marginalized sections of the society. It has not provided adequate safeguards to the marginalized and disadvantaged sections of the society. So therefore, it is not inclusive in nature, and the people remain disillusioned even after a new constitution came into existence in the year 2015. And another major problem is the corruption. Right, so corruption in the government and the elite capture of the government institutions, state resources, so that has also to some extent created disaffection among the people. And apart from that, the widening socio-economic inequalities have fueled frustration among the youth population. However, the contemporary youth protests, if you look at the protests, so they are being called as Gen Z protests. So young protesters rejecting corruption, and they are demanding more accountable and inclusive political order, because the governments, the successive governments, are actually failed in implementing the comprehensive peace agreement. And over and above that, in 2015 a new constitution has been adopted by the Nepal, and this has also neglected the marginalized sections of the society. And over and above corruption, neglect, and the elite capture of state resources and state institutions. So therefore, because of all these reasons, the protesters started rejecting corruption and demanding more accountable and inclusive, equitable political order. Now, Nepal's per capita income is only just 1.54 lakh. Right, so Nepal's per capita income is just 1.54 lakh, and unemployment is very high in Nepal. Right, so therefore, because of the higher levels of unemployment, the workforce in Nepal, they're migrating out of Nepal. They're working somewhere else outside Nepal, mostly in India. Right, so therefore, these protests from the youth of Nepal, so they actually show us that Nepal's failure, the failure of the successive governments to utilize the post-conflict peace-building resources, instead squandering them on political patronage. So all these factors are mostly responsible for the current youth protests in Nepal. Another important article is the 15th Vice President has been recently elected. So CP Radhakrishnan has been elected as the 15th Vice President of India. So let's understand the context. The context is that CP Radhakrishnan, so he was recently sworn in as the 15th Vice President of India, and his oath has been administered by President Draupadi Murmu. And in fact, he won the vice presidential elections by securing 452 votes, defeating B. Sudarshan Reddy by 152 vote margin. So B. Sudarshan Reddy from India bloc, right? So he is from India bloc, and Vice President CP Radhakrishnan, so he has been nominated as Vice President from NDA bloc. right? So therefore, if you talk about the significance of Radhakrishnan's election for India's democracy, but before going into it, so let's understand the election of the office of the Vice President of India and the Electoral College as well, right? So the Vice President is elected by an Electoral College which consists of members from the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, both elected and the nominated members. But with respect to the presidential elections, now the members of the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, excluding the nominated members, plus the members from the state legislature, Now, what is the term of the office of the Vice President? So let's understand this as well. So what is the term of the office of the Vice President? So he generally enjoys a 5-year term from the date upon which he enters his office. However, notwithstanding expiration of his term, he shall continue to hold office until his successor enters upon the office. However, in the case of death, removal, resignation of the Vice President, Constitution does not provide any method of succession apart from the fresh election. However, in such an event, Deputy Chairman can function as the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Right. So let's understand the significance of Radhakrishnan's election for India's democracy. Right. So Radhakrishnan's election for India's democracy, so it essentially means that it would further strengthen India's federal structure, because so leaders from different states can also reach such constitutional positions. Radhakrishnan is essentially from the southern part of India. So therefore, it emphasizes on the importance of experienced administrators in high constitutional offices. And in fact, it also highlights the democratic process of indirect elections for the Vice President of India. And it even demonstrates the role of political alliances, National Democratic Alliance and India Bloc, in shaping the constitutional leadership in a country like India. And apart from that, it even reinforces the tradition of respecting merit, experience, public service in the leadership roles. So let's understand some key facts about the Vice President of India. Now, Vice President of India, it is the second highest office, second highest constitutional position in India, and he acts as the Chairman of Rajya Sabha. Now, the CP Radhakrishnan, so he is now the Vice President of India. So he hails from Tirupur, Tamil Nadu, and he previously worked as the governor of multiple states, and he was also the member of Lok Sabha, and he affiliated with the National Democratic Alliance. Now, the election for the office of the Vice President was held on 9 September 2025, and Radhakrishnan secured 52 votes, defeating Sudarshan Reddy by 152 votes. Now, what are the key roles and responsibilities of the office of the Vice President as a constitutional office? So he presides over the Rajya Sabha sessions, because he is known as the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, and he even stands in for the President of India when required. And he also ensures decorum, order in the upper house of the Parliament, because he is the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. And he also oversees the discussions on crucial matters, including those related to the communal violence, bail provisions, constitutional mandates. So therefore, these are the essential functions which are being performed by the Vice President of India. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like a lecture, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.